Chapter 6 Greetings. So you arrive in Japan and start meeting people for the first time. What will you say? How will you act? What will you wear? Relax. There's nothing to worry about. In this lesson, we'll look at the basic greetings and learn how to introduce ourselves. First, I'll give you the vocab, and then we can discuss it.
おはようございます。
Good morning.
こんにちは。
Good afternoon.
こんばんは。
Good evening.
おやすみなさい。
Good night.
どうもありがとうございます。
Thank you very much.
どういたしまして。
You're welcome.
はじめまして。
Nice to meet you in the beginning.
どうぞよろしく。
Nice to meet you. Thanks in advance. I know these look like Konnichiwa and Kobanha. Sit tight. I'll explain why in a moment. The greetings for good morning, good afternoon, and good evening are used essentially as they are in English. They can be used with strangers as well as with acquaintances. There are, however, a few small differences. The first one has to do with the boundary between good morning and good afternoon. In English, we take good morning all the way up to about noon. However, in Japanese, ohayo gozaimasu literally means it is early. So if you use it too far after perhaps 10 a.m., you might have people wondering how late you get up. Another difference is that in English, we use hello as an all-purpose greeting any time of the day or night. But in Japanese, konnichiwa is definitely a daytime greeting. Use it at night and you'll probably even get a laugh or two. Perhaps like the reaction you'd get if you greeted your English-speaking friends good afternoon at 9 o'clock at night. As in English, kobanwa generally swings into action around 6 at night. For all you late night partiers, this greeting is good until perhaps 3 or 4 in the morning, when it starts to be early again instead of late. Besides being used in the literal sense when wishing someone a good night before going to bed, oyasumi nasai, or good night, is used frequently to say goodbye to someone at night, say when parting ways after eating dinner together or ending a phone conversation. Now for a couple notes on pronunciation. If you listen carefully to ohayo gozaimasu, you'll notice that it sounds almost like ohayo gozaimasu with no final U sound. This is a so-called whispered vowel because it's almost as if the speaker is pronouncing that final su ever so softly. This whispering happens frequently when words end in su. You'll notice the effect at work in our vocabulary list in the word desu as well. Many people give the su its full value, especially when speaking formally, but it's very frequently abbreviated in more relaxed speech. Listen to the whispered and non-whispered flavors of the following words below to get a feel for this. Whispered,
ございます。
non-whispered,
ございます。
whispered.
です。です。
A note about the pronunciation of konnichiwa is in order. If you want to be sure to stand out as a foreigner, go ahead and pronounce the greeting as konnichiwa. On the other hand, if you want to draw crowds of admiring followers fawning over your excellent pronunciation, be sure to honor the doubled consonant here. Listen to the example below to make sure you hear the difference between the correct pronunciation on the right and the incorrect pronunciation on the left.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
こんにちは。
Konnichiwa. But why are the greetings konnichiwa and konbanwa written using the character ha instead of wa? It's because that last character is actually a special grammatical device called the particle wa, which we'll be exploring in greater depth a few lessons down the road. You'll see this usage crop up in the next vocabulary list too. For now, you'll just have to trust me, but don't worry, there's a good explanation for it that we will learn soon. Let's look at some more vocabulary. Note that a few of these words are of foreign origin and ought to be written in katakana. We'll begin doing this after we learn that syllabary, but for now, I'll mark them with an asterisk.
です。
I'm,
お辞儀。
ojigi being bow,
お名前。
onamae meaning your name,
お名前は何ですか？
onamae wa nan desu ka? What is your name?
お元気ですか？
How are you? O genki desu ka?
元気です。
Genki desu. I'm well.
はい。
Yes.
いいえ。
Iie. No.
日本。
Nihon. Japan.
アメリカ。
America.
カナダ。
Canada.
人。
A person being from.
日本人。
a Japanese person,
アメリカ人、
an American person, Amerikajin. If you listen carefully, you'll hear that konbanwa sounds more like konbanwa, whereas genki sounds more almost like genki. What's going on there? I'd like to say that the N is a little like tofu. It picks up the flavor of the things it's cooked with. So if we say konbanwa aloud a few times, you'll notice that the first N naturally morphs into an M as the lips come together for the ba. Another example of this word for newspaper, shinbun, which sounds more like shimbun. For those who are interested, the effect is called euphony, which is a fancy way of saying that people cut corners in speech now and then to make the sounds come out better. Shinbun is actually pretty awkward to say. It's natural that the middle N becomes an M. Fortunately, you're Japanese, American, or Egyptian, and we all have the same basic speech hardware, or whether you're Japanese, American, or Egyptian. So when we encounter these changes from time to time, they should tend to make sense. Introducing yourself. Now for the first meeting. In formal settings, when two people meet for the first time, they bow to each other from the waist. Men keep their arms at their sides, fingers stretched out flat as they bow. Women put their hands together in front of their lap. This bow is called an ojigi. Normally, the person who is of lower status bows more deeply. Social status is kind of tricky, but it has to do with age, type of employment, and position in that employment. But it would be a good idea as a foreigner to always bow slightly more deeply to everyone, with the possible exception of teenagers and younger children. We'll learn the mechanics of what's happening a few lessons from now, but for now, introduce yourself. Just say your name plus desu. For example, I'm John would simply say John desu. To ask someone their name, use the phrase onamae wa nan desu ka? This phrase uses a special particle called wa, which is written using the hiragana character ha. This is one of the very few times that a character is not pronounced the way it looks. I promise. For now, just memorize the phrase. We'll be examining wa in great depth a few lessons down the line.
お名前は何ですか?
Onamae wa nan desu ka? Which is, what is your name?
ジョンです。
I'm John.
マリコです。
Mariko desu, which would be I'm Mariko. Japanese has a lot of set phrases. These are little phrases that people say to one another at particular social occasions. I like to compare that to the Vulcan phrase, live long and prosper, from the fictional world of Star Trek. The phrase is said at particular occasions and always in those exact words. As you study Japanese, you'll come across a fair number of expressions that work this way. Hajimemashite and dozo yoroshiku are two set phrases that people say when meeting someone for the first time. Literally, hajimemashite means in beginning this relationship, and dozo yoroshiku means something like best regards going forward or thanks in advance. Pick the one that rolls off your tongue the best and make that your own personal set phrase for when you meet new people. To say thank you, you get a few choices, just as we do in English. For example, sometimes we express our appreciation with a quick thanks, and other times we go all out with thank you very much, I really appreciate it. So it is in Japanese. The full phrase is domo arigatou gozaimasu, which is the most polite. Here are a few other flavors.
どうもありがとうございます。
Thank you very much.
あ
Thank
り
you.
がとうございます。ありがとうございます。
Arigatou gozaimasu.
ありがとう。
Arigatou would be just thanks.
どうも。
Domo would be cheers. I don't know if I translate that as cheers. To remember how this works, it helps to keep in mind that the real thank you meaning is living in the word arigato. The domo is the very, and there's a long story behind the gozaimasu part. But you can think of it for now as a formalizer that wouldn't mean much on its own. So you don't want to get creative and try a domo gozaimasu, since you'll be missing the actual thank you part. Domo gets to work all on its own as a sort of abbreviation of the longer phrase. Finally, a common phrase to ask someone's health is "O-genki desu ka?" However, there is a critical difference between the phrase and the English phrase "How are you?" The English phrase is an open-ended question. You might be down and out, crazy in love, or just work a day fine. However, the Japanese is a yes or no question. Literally, it means, are you healthy? Therefore, the typical answer to how are you in Japanese is actually yes, because you're affirming that you are indeed in good health. Again, we'll be looking at the mechanics of the sentence very soon, but for now, memorize Hi, genki desu as the response. Something to keep in mind about the phrase, however, is that because you are literally asking whether a person is happy or healthy, Japanese people don't ask it as often as people from other countries do. English speakers are often use it several times a day with the same person as a sort of general greeting, not even really expecting a response. But that doesn't sound right in Japanese. Ask it like that, and you'll probably get a puzzled expression in response like, "Of course I'm still healthy. You just saw me 2 hours ago." Japanese people typically use the expression to ask someone whom they haven't seen for a while. In this way, it's rather like "How are you?" spoken among friends meeting up after an interval of some time. And finally, I intentionally put several words on the vocabulary list that start with O. This is called the honorific O, and it precedes many nouns in Japanese. Sometimes it's been used for so long that it has become an inseparable part of the word, as in ojigi. But in cases where it's attached to something that can belong to someone, you usually use it to speak politely about someone else's, but take it off when referring to your own. For example, on the list, I have o namae and o genki. Namae and genki are true raw words here, meaning name and good health. But when speaking or inquiring about someone else's name or health, you attach the honorific o. You would never refer to your own name as o namae. If you mechanically translate it as honorable, so that o namae becomes honorable name, you'll get the picture. That's why, as a response to the question, O genki desu ka? Are you in honorable good health? You would say, Ha, genki desu. Yes, I'm in good health. Omitting the O, because to call one's own health honorable would be, well, less than honorable. In a nutshell, the honorific O is for other people, never yourself. In katakana. Before we finish up this lesson, we're also going to consider the first 10 katakana. Katakana is a sort of cousin syllabary to hiragana, and it's used mainly to write words of foreign origin, much as we would write foreign words in English in italics. For example, in this lesson, we have the vocabulary America. In the vocabulary list, I wrote this in hiragana, but because it is a word from a foreign language, it should correctly be written in katakana. Katakana will be fairly easy to learn. All the rules about 10-10 and yaoyu combinations work in exactly the same way, and many of the characters look similar to their hiragana cousins. You can think of hiragana and katakana like the printed and cursive alphabets in English. We'll ramp into katakana gradually. At the end of the next 5 vocabulary lessons, we'll consider about 10 characters each. Let's look at the first 10 now. The A series. A, I, U, E, O. One of the biggest differences you'll notice about katakana is that while hiragana are scrumptious and curvy, katakana are hard and angular. Keep in mind that you'll be able to write some sharp-looking characters. Actually, this syllabary is composed almost entirely of straight lines. The only curved ones you'll ever see is the one you'll see above in the characters A, E, U, and O. A, E, U, O. Other big differences between hiragana and katakana has to do with how you create long syllables. In hiragana, you'll recall, we wrote another character to extend a sound. But in katakana, it's easier you extend a sound simply by writing a horizontal bar. For example, here is the long sound A written in hiragana and katakana A. Easy stuff, right? In katakana, any sound can be extended using the horizontal bar. Here are some writing tips. Keep the angle in stroke 1 sharp in this character. When you begin stroke 2, don't curve it right away. Bring it straight down for a bit before sweeping left. Be sure to bring the second stroke straight down with a solid stop at the bottom. Don't flick your pencil down to make the stroke. Bring it straight down. Stop moving the lead, then pick up your pencil. Notice that the first two strokes of the first part of the third are all perfectly straight. Also note that the first stroke is centered over the third. Think of a flattened I-beam when you write this one. Notice that the character is slightly wider than it is tall. And lastly, notice that the second stroke does not come down through the middle of the first. Keep it slightly off to the right to make room for stroke 3. Here's some reading practice. Read and touch your way through this grid to put these newly acquired characters to work. Note the use of the horizontal bar to extend sounds in several of the examples.
愛、
Ai,
うわ、
ua,
おえ、
oe,
ああ、
a,
ええ、
e,
上、
ue,
家、
ie,
あえ、
ae,
おえ、
oe,
いお、
io,
うわ、
ua,
え
e,
い、
i,
えや、
ea,
おい、
oi,
えお。
eo. The K series. Right off the bat, you should notice that ka and ki are very similar to the hiragana kata vowels. Ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. And again, notice with the exception of the lines that curve down and toward the left, the characters are made entirely from straight lines. Westerners generally find the syllabary easier to write. 1010 can be applied to these 5 characters, just like their cousins, to produce the sounds ga, gi, gu, ge, and go. Ga, gi, gu, ge, go. Your main concerns in this character are the point in the middle of the first stroke and the hana at the end. Second, keep the characters leaning to the left, reminiscent of its hiragana counterpart. Notice that the last stroke bisects the first two at a 90-degree angle. Here we have 2 instances of the katakana curve in a single character. If you can master this curve, your characters will look great. Obviously, ke differs from ku in that the second stroke is longer, but also notice that the placement of the second stroke is slightly lower, so that it meets the first stroke in the middle, not as high up as in ku. And subtle in this font, but in ko, as in the character is slightly wider than it is tall. Here's some reading practice. Give yourself a quick drill on the katakana we've learned so far.
効果、
Koka,
芸、
ge,
描く、
egaku,
聞く、
kiku,
おきく、
okiku,
語気、
goki,
赤い、
akai,
木々、
kigi,
記号、
kigo,
稽古、
keiko,
議会、
gikai,
語句、
goku,
映画、
ega,
画家、
gaka,
具合、
guai. Dialogue. To put the vocabulary in this lesson to work, let's look in on a short conversation in which John, a Tyler student of Japanese, meets the lovely Mariko for the first time.
こんにちは。
Hello?
あ、こんにちは。
Oh, hello.
ジョンです。アメリカ人です。お名前は何ですか？
I'm John. I'm an American. What's your name?
マリコです。はじめまして。
I'm Mariko. Nice to meet you.
どうぞよろしく。
Nice to meet you too. Summary. In this lesson, we learned about the basic greetings, their honorific O, a few set phrases, and the first 10 katakana characters. We saw that 2 common greetings, konnichiwa and konbanwa, are written using a hiragana ha at the end instead of the character wa. Although we haven't met it yet, this is a special wa and will become very important later. As always, test your knowledge with a friendly chapter review below. Also, starting in this chapter, lessons that introduce new vocabulary will include a vocab test. Give it a try to drill yourself on the words we learned, plus pick up a few experience points. Let's do the chapter review. Choose the correct romanization.
完璧
Kaigo. The lines are G sound. What does the leading O in words like ogenki and onamae mean? Means something like
やっ
honorable.
た
How do you extend a vowel in katakana? Put a horizontal
や
block.
った
What does ogenki desu ka mean literally? Are you healthy?
完璧
In the phrase domo arigatou gozaimasu, what's the actual thank you part? Or where is the actual thank you part living? Arigato.
やった
Choose the correct romanization.
完璧
Iakea. Choose the correct romanization. I'm gonna go with ukie.
やった
Yeah. U. Choose the correct romanization. Aki. Cool.
やった
Choose the correct romanization. Koko. Ah.
完璧
True or false? Ohayo gozaimasu can be used until about noon.
惜しい
Yeah.
やった
Keep it up. We missed one at the end.